Welcome to the Survivor to Thriver show with your happiness expert, Samia Bano. Are you a survivor of abuse or other trauma? Are you tired of feeling stuck, silent, and stressed all the time? This is the podcast people from all over the world join in to learn exactly how to stop suffering and start living with more inner peace and joy. Are you ready to eliminate suffering from your life and transform from a survivor to thriver? Then congratulations, you are in the right place. Let's get started. Hey, welcome back to the Survivor to Thriver show. We have been talking about how to act in the face of our fears. And I was sharing with you the three most important components that we need to have in place in order to be able to act in the face of our fears. Those three components are to make a commitment to act with courage, which is about feeling the fear and doing the necessary deed anyway. Secondly, responding to our fear with compassion and empathy. And finally, focusing on generating more peace and joy. So I'm so excited today because we get to talk about the component number 3, which is about focusing on generating peace and joy. It's my favorite of the 3 components. It's certainly the part where I know I have the most fun. After all, it is all about focusing on generating more peace and joy. And here is the very simple reason why it works and why it is so essential that you incorporate this component into your overall strategy to help you act in the face of your fear. The fact is that it is quite literally impossible for us to experience fear and joy at the same time, or to experience fear and peace at the same time. Just try it. Try to think of something scary and joyful at the same time. Or try to think of ground yourself in a feeling of peace and try to feel afraid at the same time. And I'm willing to bet you every penny that I own and more that you will not be able to do it. It's just, basic law of how human psychology works. So I can make this bet and feel fully confident that I'm going to win. You are not going to be able to experience peace and joy if you're feeling fear, and you're not going to be able to experience fear if you're experiencing peace and joy. But what happens is that when you're actually feeling the fear, it may, and especially if that feeling of fear is very strong for you at this particular time, you can't just jump straight into focusing on generating peace and joy. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying it's not very likely, and it's not very probable, and it's going to be, at the very least, very challenging for you to do that. But if you allow these three components that we have been talking about to work in alignment with each other and kind of support each other, then you'll find that it'll become relatively easier for you to act in the face of your fear. Remember, component number 1 is to act with courage, which means it's an acknowledgement that the fear may still be there. You may not be able to entirely eliminate the fear. But nonetheless, there are times that we hit in our lives, that we reach in our lives, where really we only have either the choice of continuing to stay stuck in our fear or act in the face of the fear, to feel the fear and do the deed anyway, to act with courage and in a way that allows us to move forward in the direction that we need. Okay, so sometimes we hit these difficult points of intersection, and so and this is the kind of intersection you're talking about. That here you have hit a point where you have no other choice, where you must move forward, or at least that is what your strongest desire is, but you still have the fear. So now you have to figure out a way to move forward. Now, again, let me put things back in the context of the example I've been sharing with you over the last few episodes. So remember, for me, the big fear was, oh my gosh, if I allow myself to be vulnerable and I reach out for help and support, what if somebody uses that information to hurt me again? That was the fear, that I'd get hurt again. And that fear for 12 years, kept me in a script and kept me silent about the truth of my being a survivor of child sexual abuse. And in that process, I got isolated and disconnected from the people around me, right? And for the longest time, that fear was so strong and overwhelming that I couldn't even imagine telling anyone about what had happened and reaching out for help and support. I couldn't even imagine it. And throughout that time that I couldn't even imagine breaking the silence, I had subjected myself to lots and lots of blame and shame and guilt. So what doesn't work is blaming and shaming and putting ourselves through a lot of guilt trips in the context of helping us to effectively resolve the fear and move forward in the face of it. I mean, it might work for some people in some circumstances, but I can tell you for the vast majority of us, the vast majority of the time, that is not an effective strategy. What does work is responding to ourselves with empathy and compassion. So in my case, when I did respond to myself with empathy and compassion, I was able to understand that, hey, there's actually a gift in the fear that I'm experiencing. And the gift is the knowing, the understanding that there's nothing wrong with me for feeling that fear, that there is a valid, underlying, legitimate need that I have, because of which the fear was initially generated. And the silence that I got engulfed in was just a strategy that my protector self was using to help meet the underlying need that of wanting to be safe, of needing to be safe. And I deserve to be safe. I have a right to be safe. And so there was nothing wrong with me for feeling the fear, and there was nothing wrong with me for doing what I could to be safe. It was just that it was now time for me to employ a different strategy, because the strategy of staying in silence was no longer working for me. It was no longer serving. Well, it was working to help me feel kind of safe, but it was also having this unfortunate side effect, and I didn't want to have to deal with the side effect anymore, right? So now, once I understood this, that this was actually what was going on, this was the root cause of the problem that I was struggling with, all I had to do was figure out a solution where I could meet both of my needs. My need to feel safe and my need to have more deeper, meaningful connections with real live people in my life. So I was like, okay, well, I can do that. I can do that. Now that I understand the problem, I can figure out the solution. So if the problem is, okay, I need to feel safe, and and at the same time be able to talk to people about what I'm going through. So then, okay, what are the conditions that I need in order to be able to talk to somebody and feel safe doing it? So some of the things that once I started thinking about the problem in this context, I realized, okay, there are a few things that I need in order to feel safe while talking to somebody. For example, I need to be able to know that the person I share this my truth with is not going to go and tell my family about it, because I was not ready for my family to find out as yet about what had happened. Another thing that I needed in order to feel safe talking to somebody was a reasonable sense of confidence that that person would respond to me with compassion and empathy, in that they wouldn't blame me and shame me for having been abused, right? That they would understand that it wasn't my fault, and so forth. And another thing that I needed was a reasonable sense of confidence that the person I shared my feelings with and my thoughts with would also be able to give me some guidance and some support, some direction in how to help myself cope, how to help myself heal and move forward. Because, I couldn't do it on my own. I realized that by that point in time. And I realized, and then so once I realized, okay, so these are the things that I need to have in place in order to feel safe while talking to somebody, then I started to consider, okay, who are the people that I have access to in my life that could provide these conditions for me. It was like, I think my best option is to go see the psychologist in our Student Psychological Services Center on my college campus. Cool. All right, great. So figured out that win-win solution, right? But really what allowed me to figure out that win-win solution was that I responded to myself, to my feelings, with empathy and compassion, right? And when I responded with empathy and compassion and I focused on the win-win solution, then, the win-win solutions are really the key that allow us to generate the inner peace and joy that we want, and to really focus. Can you see how if you have a win-win solution, it will naturally generate inner peace and joy for you? Yeah. Didn't that make a lot of sense? But you see how it's not necessarily a linear process. I know in some ways I describe it as a linear process, but it's not truly or necessarily just a linear process, right? So for example, if I had practiced empathy and compassion towards myself, but I had not made the commitment to act with courage. Remember, I was sharing with you, when I showed up for my appointment to talk with the counselor, I still had fear. I was still experiencing fear, and I still wasn't sure I'd be able to go through with it. So I needed to have not only this already come out with the win-win solution, right? Which comes, which is about sort of focusing on generating inner peace and joy in my life. Not only did I also need to be reacting to myself with empathy and compassion rather than blaming and shaming in that moment, but I also needed to have made the commitment to act with courage. Otherwise, let's say if I had just empathy and compassion, but no commitment to acting with courage, I could have been like, oh, I'm feeling scared. Empathy and compassion, I understand I'm feeling scared. Let me just turn around and run away. Right? Or let's say I had empathy and compassion, but I just stopped at the empathy and compassion, and I didn't move forward towards generating, focusing on solutions, which is about generating the peace and joy. I might never have figured out the solution. Right? So it's like, really, all those three things had to kind of come together in my experience, treating myself with compassion and empathy, and shifting my focus to generating inner peace and joy, and staying true to my commitment to act with courage, for me to successfully go through this moment of challenge and arrive at the scene where I have my appointment with my counselor and I'm still feeling the fear, but I feel the fear and do the deed anyway, and I follow through on my intention, and I talk to the counselor, and of course, in the aftermath of that breakthrough, I felt great, right? And that's one of the ironic things, is that in a lot of these situations where we feel so afraid and, we prevent ourselves from taking the necessary action, the courageous action, once we actually step into into that action with the courage, then we realize, oh my gosh, this was actually not so bad after all. Actually, it's pretty good. And why didn't I do this before? I wish I had done it sooner. Right? It's like, wow. It's just like one of those interesting ironies of life sometimes. But hey, you know what? Again, responding to ourselves with empathy and compassion. You're like, hey, okay, it took me the amount of time it took me, and it's okay. I did the best I could. I made the best decisions that I could with what I knew and what I had. And I moved as fast as I could with what I knew and what I had. So no blaming, no shaming. All right, so on that note, happy note, let's wrap up right here for today. I want to make another request of you that if you have an iTunes account, now that our show is on iTunes, please go on iTunes and give our show, the Survivor to Thriver show, a 5-star rating and help other people to find it more easily. Okay, so I will see you tomorrow, and until then, I wish you lots of peace and joy.